On today's episode, we're going to discuss last play scenarios and how to practice them with a heavy defensive emphasis. And joining me to do that is the assistant head football coach and outside linebackers coach at Army West Point, John Lewis. John, great to have you back here on the podcast.
Hey, thank you, Keith. I love your podcast. Listen to them every time I'm driving back from, anywhere. I sit down there and I listen to them the whole way. Love it. It's good stuff. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. Well, we always time this up, so we make sure that we talk about Lauren's First and Goal Clinic, too. And we have some exciting news about that we'll get to later in the podcast. But our focus today is going to be the last play scenarios, how we practice them. And there's a ton of detail that goes into it. And I know, going back to my high school days when I first approached this, we definitely work on it every week. But I didn't have nearly the list that we're going to cover today. And I think it's a great list of just the different scenarios and an approach to take to those. I think a lot can be learned just from the thought process and how we practice those. So when you think of those, the last play scenarios, John, how to practice them, first of all, giving us an overview and your approach to this.
Well, one thing I did, as a defensive coordinator, what I did is every Thursday, and a lot of times I do this when field goal was going on offense, because they would take a couple of our guys, but it wasn't that critical. And I would start it like it was the last play of the game, right? The last play of the game, not half. I think that's a little bit different scenario, obviously. But last play of the game, and I would work my way as furthest to closest to the end zone. And we had a specific defense for each one of those scenarios. And, I remember at Lafayette, we had a changeover in staff one year, and I went from secondary to linebackers, and we hired a great secondary guy, Doug McFadden. And I remember we spent an entire day on these last play scenarios, like going through it, in the off season, getting ready. And I remember after the season, he said, I thought we were nuts doing that. We used every damn one of them, I think. I mean, so it matters. And, I've been doing this for a minute, like the kids say, and it's 37 years. So we've lost games because of last minute scenarios. And they're not always the last minute, because some of them first down, go down on offense, and, lost games both ways on that. So those are the things I'd like to hit today. But
yeah.
So, essentially, Keith, for the last play scenarios, hey, we're winning on defense. And I always tell our kids, man, you're winning on defense with a minute left. You got to win the game. And, so we went through the last play scenarios on Thursdays, and it was real quick. It was versus a scout team, and we would start as far away from the end zone as we might be and work our way close. So, the first one, Keith, is I see teams do this. They line up, and the other team's on the minus 25 or minus 30. And I always wanted to know, and I wrote it on my call sheet, how far could he throw a Hail Mary for real?
Mm-hmm.
Like, how far could the guy throw it? And if I could find one on tape, then we practice that specific one, okay? But nobody can throw a Hail Mary from the 25, the minus 25, right? So we had a different defense than if it was a Hail Mary, because now what's going to happen, it's going to be hook and lateral, right? It's going to be what we call a zombie type play, where you got to keep the ball alive. And so, to me, we rush two guys. We're going to drop 9. There's no point in pressuring them. There's no point in even rushing 3. We want to make sure we got as enough coverage as humanly possible, and make sure that we stay fanned out for when they kick the ball all over the place.
Are you looking at, when you're looking at that scenario, knowing that, hey, this is going to be a bunch of laterals, right? Do you take, your bigger defensive tackles off the field? Are you looking at maybe a little bit of a different personnel set, knowing that, we're trying to turn this into a rugby match?
Absolutely, 100%. Like, I think you look at the other side, right? And I've said this a bunch. If I'm ever a head coach, this is the case. Like, it's harder on offense because you've got to have 5 offensive linemen, unless it's a kicking formation, right? So I think there's merit in it. Again, you don't get in these scenarios very often, but there's merit in lining up in a kicking formation, because the minute the offensive lineman touches the football, the play's dead. You watch it, every one of those scenarios. As soon as one of those guys touches, they're dead anyway. So they really got to get out of the way if you're going to use them. But it's the same thing on defense. You're exactly right. I would like as many skill guys as I can. So it was a one-word defense and a one-word group that, hey, this was that defensive call. So you're exactly right. And then I might have 2 rushers in there at best, but I've got 9 real skill guys that can tackle, and I want to make sure we're not all directly chasing the ball, because again, the point of it on defense is to win the football game. It's not to give up 10 yards on that play. You know, we've all seen these scenarios where it's really scary and the ball gets tackled on the 10, but it's still a win. And, you know, someday you just know this. Either I'm bowl eligible or I'm not, right? I won my league or I'm not. I'm going to play.
You know, you brought up that idea of getting into a kick formation, and that made me think of, I'm not quite sure exactly what they were going to do, because the play ended up getting, tackled pretty quickly. But the Cowboys had put Zeke Elliott at center and moved all the offensive linemen out to the sideline. Like, it was, all right, something's up here. They're trying to create space and do some things. And on the offensive side, I think it takes a different approach too. The one thing I see common in these situations, I mean, every now and then, there'll be the rare play that scores, but these guys just seem to be going backwards and backwards and backwards and backwards. The ball keeps going the wrong direction. And I've always said, hey, if I ever, got back into it and coached again, I would, in, spring or in camp, bring a rugby coach in and teach these guys the approach to, multiple laterals down the field. Cause that, you don't see rugby teams sending the ball backwards to advance the ball. I just think there's something to be learned from that sport as well.
I agree. That's a great point. We brought our rugby guys in to do tackling. When we first went to the Seahawks, the Gator, the rugby tackle stuff, we brought our rugby coaches who won the national championship last year. We brought them in and spent time with them. So I think that's a great point. I think you absolutely can do that.
So obviously we're looking at knowing the arm of the quarterback. I agree. You got to know that. Where do you get to where they're going to throw the ball up? Because that does change things. It probably changes, again, that approach on exactly what you're going to call, because once you get into that range, you're going to do different things with the rush, the drop, maybe even the guys that you put in the game. I know on the defensive side, we'd always look for a receiver who could get up, had ball skills, but was taller, and he was definitely going to be the guy to try to get up into the air and knock that down, right? So, again, just looking at last play scenarios, people, all those things. So, moving down the field, I'm not sure which area you wanted to attack next.
Well, I think I think it's a good point about the receiver. So, because that's my next point. If it's not a Hail Mary, don't have that receiver in there. There were times when I was defensive coordinator where I had 2 receivers in there. We used, if you watch the game this year, right before half against Navy, Andre Carter, who's going to get drafted, he's our pass rush guy. He's our outside linebacker, 6'6". Went to the combine and the Senior Bowl. He's back there. He's not rushing the passer. He's back there and actually knocked the ball down, spiked it into the end zone on the next scenario, which is the Hail Mary, right? So I don't want that guy deep if it's not a Hail Mary. And again, you have to have a different defense. You can't say it's one defense and this is the group and then try to adjust when they're racing their guys up because they don't have a timeout. You have to practice it. So it was one group with backups, the backups. And because you're using so many DBs and stuff in these kind of groups, this guy might have to back up 3 spots, right? And the next thing is too, that I've learned over the years, is you need a real depth chart on the field of these last scenarios, because when somebody's dinged up and they can't go, you have to have a guy that's actually practiced it. And that's why we did it every Thursday. And again, we might have practiced it one time on Thursday and then went to the next scenario, right? So to me, the next scenario though, Keith, is now they got a Hail Mary. It's at midfield, but I would always argue this to the death of me that, Usain Bolt can't run 55 yards in 3 seconds. Now the ball's going to hang out in the air. I get it. You know what I mean? So there's that factor to it. But you watch all the Hail Marys, and they almost all had the same things in common. One, the quarterback pats the ball and is able to move to his throwing hand or step up, obviously, right? The second scenario is it's a 3-man rush and we just give him time, right? And then somebody gets behind the pile and sometimes in front of the pile. So to me, the way you set up that play, they can get it to the end zone. What I did most of the time, and I try to find film, because a lot of guys will put 3 receivers into the boundary when their boundary is to their right and they got a right-handed quarterback, right? So I literally, with a right-handed quarterback, I'd call it left something. So our defense lined up to the left no matter what. And I brought 4 guys from the left and made it where your pass protection is going to be really hard and had 1 guy to the right to get it pulled up. Does that make any sense?
Yeah.
So I want to push the guy away from his throwing hand because I don't care who you are. You can scramble to your right and heave it pretty good. Pushing to your left is way harder, right? Way harder. And if he pulls it down, we're going to rally and knock it down. And that happened one year where the quarterback was scrambling so much he dumped it to a tailback and the crowd's going crazy. It probably happened twice, so I had a way to kind of mug him. But they dumped it to tailback and he went for like 40 yards and we tackled him on the 15. The game was over, right? So, on offense though, you have to know that's a zombie play too, and you got to know that, hey. And what I mean zombie is you're trying to stay alive no matter what, right? So you gotta have somebody trailing it and pitch it to somebody and do that. And again, the way I look at those plays, get the offensive line out of the way because as soon as it's pitched to them, play's over anyway. So I just would get them out of the way. But that's what I did as far as a Hail Mary. I think a Hail Mary is different than the next scenario in that now I've got a Hail Mary on the 35-yard line or so. Does that make sense? 40, probably the 35. And then I would write down on my call sheet which defense I was going to run exactly by where the field position was. So I didn't have to think about it during the game. That makes sense? All right. So I knew if it was on this minus territory, I was going to do 1 defense and rush 2 guys. If it was on the next defense, I was going to rush 5 guys. And then I worked my way down again where, if it only takes a couple seconds to heave it up into the end zone, then I think you go back to your 3-man rush. I still think you try to, we used to try to pin the tackle and get a guy around to get to the quarterback quickly and still try to push him away from his throwing hand. If that makes sense, right? But we knew the Hail Mary was going to get off, so that's how I did it. And the other thing we did some is we added a rusher late. So he actually banged a guy. And this worked. We were playing Richmond one year with Coach Clausen, and they had thrown a Hail Mary and completed it to win the game, but the guy had stepped out of the back of the end zone, and when he came back in, wasn't eligible, right? So we had about 8 minutes. We had about 8 minutes to, talk about and think about it while they were trying to sort out what it was, right? So we luckily got another play, and the next play what I did is, and I would do this the rest of my career probably, is we banged a guy, and then I sent him late. So what happened was they picked up the protection. The guy got hit. He didn't sack him, but at that point he was screaming at the quarterback, and the quarterback threw it out of the back of the end zone and won the game. Does that make sense? So it didn't happen right away, but it wasn't a quick, hey, I'm going to rush 5 guys. There's no point. They're not going to get there. He's going to get it into the end zone quick enough and go from there. The next thing, Keith, is, and I learned this from Jay Bateman a lot, is you hardly ever get a pass interference on this play. All right, so we would always say 15 is better than 50. So you hardly ever get pass interference on that last Hail Mary play. So what I think happens, the other part of it is when the ball's thrown, you got to practice this. You got to have one guy that's designed to go up and spike that ball into the ground. I'm not sure it's not bad catching it once in a while, I'll be honest with you. Because you watch guys, they spike it and they hit somebody right in the chest and he catches it. I saw it in the Wisconsin game one time where he spiked it down and it went right to a guy and he walked in the end zone. So, but you need the other guys. Their job is not to jump at the ball. You can't have a whole bunch of guys jump at the ball, especially the 5'9" guys. So they need to box their guys out like basketball. It can't be ridiculous. But if you do get an interference call, which I don't know if I've ever seen it, then then they get another crack at it 15 yards closer, depending on where you're at, right? They still haven't won the game. So to me, the worst thing in the world is the ball pops up and somebody catches. So you can't be celebrating, which that's the other thing I see all the time. Guys are jumping and celebrating, do all this stuff. You need to run as fast as you possibly can to that pile if you're not close.
Yeah, I think that's a good point about those other guys and not having everybody jump for the ball. You know, there's the tipper they have, the guy in the to get the tip in the back of the end zone. You certainly need to get somebody plastered to him, right? I've seen guys, you know, at the throw be in the right place. You see them back there where they're supposed to be, but they didn't go find that guy who's there for the tip. You like you said, you got to box them out like you're going for a rebound, and that includes everybody down there. I think that's something very, a detailed point. You want to make sure you get practice. Is not just, okay, on offense, here's the tipper and, the guy going to the back and the guy to the front. Is those other guys fighting for position to be inside? Because, it's basically, try to get yourself between the man and the ball so that no one else is getting it.
Exactly. You got to play like your hair's on fire and the game depends on it, because it does, right? So, and you can't, from a math standpoint, it's math. You can't rush 5 guys in the other scenario we just talked about and have, 9 guys in the end zone. It doesn't work that way. You have to pick, but you can get bangs on the most critical guys, right? If it's Randy Moss, I'm going to get hit on him somewhere, and I'm going to make sure that he gets boxed out, right? He's the guy. So you have to know who the guys are. And going back to your personnel standpoint, in the Hail Mary defense, at least where I'm rushing 5 guys, now I got 1 or 2. I got the best guys in the program are going to be back there to be that leaper. We oftentimes had a receiver, and this year we had Andre Carter, right? We had somebody who was going to do a great job. There were times we had 2 guys. We'd have, Andre Carter on defense and another guy on offense for us that could go up and get that ball and make sure it gets either caught or really spiked into the end zone. So I think the next scenario, though, Keith, is it becomes, and this one's a little bit hairier, but I practiced it. I called it Alamo, last stand, right? And I would rush 2 guys again because I was on like the 20 or the 15, and I just thought, I'm going to rush 2 guys, maybe a guy late, you build a defense for it, and I'm going to have 9 droppers. I might bring 1 out of coverage late once the whole thing develops and run at them, but that's a pretty good deal now. There's not much room to run. The pressure doesn't matter anymore. He can get it out quickly. And I think that scenario is worth at least thinking about. We practice it every Thursday. I don't think I ever used it. And then the last play of the game where, hey, now I'm just using a regular defense. And that's your original defense. To me, you got to use that 12th defender. I always talk to our guys all the time. By rule, if you tackle them in the end zone, it's still a touchdown, right? So if the ball's going to the end zone from a pass standpoint, then run through the end zone. If it's a run, if it gets dumped somewhere, and it's that last play scenario, the good offenses are going to be ready to pitch it, right? So, and I think that's what's practicing on the offensive side, where, hey, I got to dump it off. I got to zombie this ball again. I better get rid of it. And I think the linemen just go block somebody. They don't even, if it gets dumped, the lineman should race down the field and block somebody. Don't even try to get the ball because, again, the game's over once they catch it, unless you got a ridiculous guy, I think. So, but again, the way we practiced it, Keith, was on Thursday, I could run a first group and a second group through there. And it might not be a whole second group, obviously, because there's so many defensive backs involved in this thing, right? And maybe a couple of receivers. But that's why I did it during field goal, because the receivers were never involved in their field goal, right, on Thursday. So I could get that 5 minutes where I might get a chance to go down the field twice and get all these scenarios practiced. But I thought those were good scenarios that, that were helpful. And they, other than the Alamo, the last stand, every one of those were used during my time as a defensive coordinator, and some of them multiple times. There was a stretch there when we sacked the quarterback or he threw it for 15 yards because he couldn't get it off over and over and over when we brought pressure into his throwing hand. There's just too many guys, right?
Well, those are going down the field of things. Now, sometimes you have to account for the situation where they're up, right? For them, it's a first down, go down situation. And you're trying to, get the ball back, make sure that they don't get that first down. And there's an approach to that as well.
Exactly right. I think on offense, we lost a game one time because if we go first down, go down, so we practice it. This is way back. And our running back broke a 35-yard run and ran out of bounds. And they had almost no timeouts if they had any. We kicked it a couple plays later. We had to punt it, and they scored a touchdown and won the game. So, you have to understand that on offense, like first down, go down, right? But here's what happened to me on defense that really made me think about it twice. A couple times it was third down, and they either would have had to kick a long field goal or a punt. But if they get the first down, they're going to go down, right? They're going to go down. And we didn't do a good enough job on defense and gave up a real quick outcut one time and a real quick slant. So what I started to do is I would yell out a word, all right? We used Kamikaze, which I don't know if you can use that, but we were going to go down in flames if we were going to go down. Because I would explain the scenario to them in preseason, and we would practice it. Once a week we'd practice it where, hey, we're going to do everything we can on this play to get them stopped. If they do a slant and go, an out and up, a hitch and go, and score, we're better off than if they get the first down and take a knee, because now they're just going to take a knee and that's it. Does that make sense? So we had a word to tell them, because if not, they don't understand as players. Half the time they don't even know the down and distance, which drives you insane on fourth down, right? So it's third down, and I watch, and we're in this defense, and we give up a slant because we're playing like, hey, I can't give up the touchdown. That's not the case. You got to jump those routes. And then I think on defense on that scenario, right, the 4-minute defense they call it, right? I think you have to be in position where you understand how many timeouts they got, right? Because you watch the NFL all the time, and with 100% certainty, they're going to run the ball. And yet the defenses don't look like they know that. Like, they're going to run the football. And if they don't, if they incomplete it, the clock stops, right? Right? Especially when you're inside of the 2-minute deal. So you have to have a word that tags this defense. And we did. We used the word Kamikaze, like, hey, we're going to crash and burn. But we also, if we played one high, we called stop with it, which meant the safety was going to out and out flat foot it. The Kamikaze told the corners and everybody else that they were going to jump the first cut, right? I don't think zero coverage blitz is necessarily the best answer, because those are a lot of times you don't defend the run very well with those, right? So I think you're better off taking your quarters coverage and playing it like the red zone, where I'm going to stop all run plays and really lock them down with my safeties and corners, or I play one high and flat for the safety so he can run the alley. But, play really, really good run defense, but have an answer for if they sprint out and show an out cut, that's what happened to me, or a quick 3-step slant. So I think that scenario's got to be practiced. But if you don't use a word, they don't understand that scenario, right?
Yeah, you got to prepare them for that situation. And looking at just other scenarios, give up the score, right? And being able to communicate that too. I know on the offensive side, we've seen it quite a bit lately, where those guys got to fight to get down, because now the defense is actually trying to keep them up and get them into the end zone because they need to get the ball back.
Exactly right. I think I shouldn't say this, but I still believe in my heart. I think the Seahawks, when they lost versus the Patriots, I thought that was the single worst play call in the history of football. I mean, in the history of football since Rutgers, Princeton. I mean, they're going to let Marshawn Lynch walk in. I mean, he's going to walk in, and then to throw the interception. But right, you have to understand on defense that, and again, you make a word, whatever that word is. I know what people use. I won't fire it out there. It might not be correct anymore. But you have a defense where, hey, I'm going to let them score, and it can't be that obvious. Or guys are smart. They take a knee, right? It's the same thing. It's first down, go down on offense, which we saw in the Super Bowl this time around, which was a great play. I mean, it wouldn't be if he missed the field goal, but it's a great play. But sometimes you got to push them into the end zone. I mean, it goes that far. So you gotta, I think, not be obvious and be ready to go that. But yeah, I think that scenario definitely applies. I think another one is making sure your kids know the down and distance. You know, we're playing North Texas in a bowl game a few years back, and it's overtime, and it's fourth down. And we got a kid, Ryan England, who's one of the smartest players I've ever coached, officer in the United States Army, killing it. And I would show our kids that play. You know, the quarterback scrambling around, he throws a pass, and he spikes it and celebrates as fast as you can do it. Like, he spikes the ball to the ground and celebrates. He could have caught that ball and returned it for 10 yards. He could have done all kinds of things. But there's a guy that understood the end of the game. It wasn't about getting another interception. It wasn't about doing any of those things. And yeah, he could have caught it and took a knee. I get it. But I mean, he understood this. It was obvious to me and everyone in that stadium and everyone on TV that he knew what the scenario was. Does that make sense? Because, you know, how many times in your career have you watched a guy drop an interception and he's down on himself, and it was a 25-yard play and it was fourth down? You know what I mean? Because I've seen a couple times where fourth down, a guy intercepted it and gets the ball knocked out. I'm not even talking last play scenario, but you got to know the situation in the game is my point. And as coaches, it's our job to teach them and have words, I think, to remind them.
Yep, definitely. There's another scenario, John, we talked about before we got going, but, you know, the team trying to take a knee, especially the shotgun team, that there may be an opportunity within there to get the ball back as well.
Exactly right. You know, I always tried to do this. The shotgun teams, if they took any centers before the game, under center snaps, I'd try to see how good they were at it. You know, I try to get close enough to see, because some guys aren't great. But there's been a couple of times in my career where, and I don't think you do this unless you're down by a score or less. I don't. I remember Tom Coughlin got really angry at Greg Schiano in the NFL one time because Greg tried to sub the center, and he thought, why do you do that? Well, if you're down by 5, I don't understand. The game's not over, right? So we did it one year when I was at Lafayette versus Penn, and they were a shotgun team. They went under center. We knocked the ball loose, got it, and we were throwing Hail Marys at the end of the game. I mean, it's to me, I don't know why you don't practice it and try it. And we just had a signal for the sub thing. I don't know why you don't do it real close to the end zone. I don't know why you don't do it when they rush up there on 4th and 1. I think this, you know, because you can't stop the sneak anymore. I mean, you can't. It's almost impossible. You can, you know, if you're not running sneak, then you got to figure it out, the rules. To me, you can, you know, assist the runner, right? So I mean, it's pretty hard to do it, but you can get that ball out once in a while, especially if they're a shotgun team. And, you know, one year we're playing, I won't say the team, but it was down toward the end zone, and I called it, and we got the ball out, and the edge guys were just standing around. And, you know, boy, you're really disappointed because the ball popped out. And if everybody anticipates the ball popping out and plays to the end of the game like you should, we'd have got that ball. You know, we got that ball. We must have scored with that ball. So you have to be ready for that scenario, to me. And again, it's another thing is practice it. We practice it. We practice it every Thursday. And again, it didn't have to be full speed. It was just like a muscle memory reminder on that's what you do. The other one, Keith, that we didn't talk about was before the half. Before the half is different, right? So before the half, you're not sure what they're going to do. I think on offense, if you don't try to throw a Hail Mary when you have the opportunity to throw a Hail Mary, if you have the ability to throw a Hail Mary, to me, you're insane. Because on defense, it puts so much pressure on you. It really does. So I think that's one scenario, is making sure they don't get in range to throw that Hail Mary. But the other scenario that happens before the half once in a while, and it's not a ton, but it happens, is they've got no timeouts before the half, and they've got 8 or 9 seconds left on the clock. Right? So they got 2 plays. They got 1 play to try to score and 1 play to kick a field goal. Well, if that's the scenario, and I know they got no timeouts, to me, I got another word that says, hey, I'm going to do everything I can to stop this play, including I'm going to grab guys. I'm going to hold guys. Because if the play takes 5 seconds and I get a holding call in the end zone or whatever it is, they got to decide whether they're going to just go ahead and take the 3 points or not. Right? You got 1 play left. So it doesn't come up a ton. But again, you have no way to communicate that unless you have a word and you've practiced it. Does that make sense? Because that scenario happens, I think. It really does. That scenario happens too.
Well, it's all with all these situations. It is about having the procedures, and the procedures have to have a name, because if you don't, there's nothing to really cement that this is what they're doing. So that's been one of the key things that you've said throughout is everything has to have that one word call essentially to this is what it is. And sometimes it will include personnel.
Exactly right. I'll give you one last one. So, because this you see on TV a bunch, right? The announcers are saying they got to protect the sideline, right? Because they're trying to get in field goal range. They got to protect the sideline. They got no timeouts. And they keep saying it, but you can't just drop a defense on the side that says to do that. You know, you can play your Tampa 2 and you got 2 hard corners, but they can high-low that guy, right? They can high-low that guy. So this is another scenario we had where we would rush 3 guys and we protected the sideline. You had to either pull it down and run, which the clock was going to run out, or you had to dump in the middle, which in college, if they get a first down, the clock has to stop. But you can only spike it, right, in certain seconds. I mean, you have to have 3 seconds, don't you, to spike it now. So I think that you have to have a defense that truly protects your sideline. Again, it's a one-word defense. It's a certain personnel group. So that was one of our last-minute scenarios that I don't think we talked about that 100% came up. You know, they were going to kick a field goal, and it's a little hairier before the half, but they were going to kick a field goal, and they were going to try to get that 10-yard, 12-yard, 14-yard. To me, Tampa 2 is not good enough. You know, we had something that protected the 6-yard throw and the 14-yard throw. Now, the middle was pretty open, but they're not throwing to the middle, right? So, and if they do, half's over. So I think that's the last one. I think it's really worth talking about. I'm sure there's other ones we forgot, but those are ones that have come up a bunch since I've been coaching.
Yeah, with your rush on that, I know you've directed the rush in talking about these different scenarios sometimes. Are you looking then, you know, knowing that, hey, this guy's going to step up and throw in the middle, are you looking for more of a middle push in that?
Yeah, a little bit. Exactly right. I think you're right. It's definitely not a bring them all from one side scenario. To me, they've got X amount of seconds left, so they got to do a quick game throw, right? It's something quick game. So I think it is probably it's a 3-man rush because I want to drop 8, but I just want to use more of my defenders to drop into the sideline. Does that make sense? So what we don't want is a flood concept that can be thrown in there and they step out of bounds and then they can jog out there, take their time, and kick a field goal. So that's why I don't think Tampa 2 is good enough. I mean, you can high-low Tampa 2, right? I don't think that's the answer. To me, we had more than one guy protecting the sideline. We had different depths of it.
Well, Coach, that takes us to our little talk here about Lauren's First and Goal Clinic, now in its 3rd year. It's been just a tremendous clinic. The resources that come out of it have been incredible. All of those available on CoachTube afterwards. And this year, we have even more reason to get the premium pass. The regular pass certainly is good. That gets you 30 days. But there's 130 talks. And I'll tell you, if you're coaching, this is a great place to learn all phases of the game, building the program, strength and conditioning. It's all covered in this clinic. But what we have available now is on CoachTube, Lauren's First and Goal Clinic Plus, which is going to be that year-long access. What will be nice if you've typically been getting the year-long access via the clinic site, none of those are cut up or chaptered. You're just getting the replays as you saw them as they were presented. So all of these will be cut up and put on CoachTube and chaptered so that you're able to go back to certain sections of those over the course of the year, or maybe if you're scrolling through, you're just looking for something certain you want to learn about. Those will all be chaptered. So that's the 130 from this year. And then what we're doing is every month rotating 10 courses from the past clinics in. So over the course of the year, you can have access to 250 courses from Lauren's First and Goal. And, you know, the resources here are just incredible. These guys do such a good job presenting and giving back in this clinic.
Yeah, no doubt. I mean, it's just, you know, I got a call, Keith, the other day from the head coach of the Saskatchewan Roughriders, right? And he was telling me, he goes, I don't know how everybody doesn't buy this. and he just had a question on how to purchase it. But he goes, I don't know how everyone doesn't buy this. He goes, you have the two best offensive line coaches in the CFL speaking. Like, just from a Canada standpoint, I don't know how you pick it. And I just when we were talking, I just looked right now. If they all are here and everything else, we've got 8 coaches in the NFL currently speaking at this. We probably have about 30 Power Fives or more, if I don't sit here and count them up. We have 7 CFL coaches, a ton of FCS coaches, and then some other level coaches. So we have strength coaches, right? I mean, Tommy Moffitt is one of the strength coaches there. He was the strength coach at Miami Hurricanes and then LSU for 20 years. I mean, for him to share his knowledge, like, everybody's going to get something out of this. So I really don't know how you don't buy the staff pass. I really don't. I have a hard time understanding why you don't get it. You can watch this stuff for up to a year, and like you just said, you're going to get more than even what's on there. And there's over we say numbers, but there's over 130 college coaches signed up, and pro, obviously CFL, NFL, college guys signed up to actually do this, which is an unreal number. For $299, I don't know how you get a better deal than that.
Definitely. And just to highlight a few guys, we have Nebraska head coach Matt Rule, who's presented at other clinics that we've run before, always does a tremendous job. Joe Moorhead is back now, the head coach at Akron, and his presentation at the first Lawrence First and Goal was the top rated one. This year he's talking about 6-for-6 run game and RPOs. We're excited about having Penn State offensive coordinator Mike Yersich, one of the great offensive minds in college football. He's presenting on Quick Game. We have William Inch, who's the assistant head coach and co-DC at Washington, did a tremendous job at Fresno State, really turning that defense around. He'll be presenting Jim Knowles, Ohio State. 2 years ago, one of the top presentations on the defensive side, and he talked about playing offense on defense. This year, he's going into the details of playing linebacker. Great young offensive line coach in Darnell Stapleton from Florida, presenting on zone scheme basics and fundamentals. Andrew Jackson is back. He did a tremendous job for us last year. This year, he'll be speaking on the defensive run game progression. Could go on and on and on about the great guys that we have here. But I think the important thing is that this is for a tremendous cause. That's probably the best part of it, because I think the spirit of all these coaches, I don't feel like they hold back. I think they're giving everything they have in these presentations because this is for such a great cause.
I got a preview of a couple of the presentations, and they were ridiculous. I think the college guys know that the college guys purchase it and watch it, so they want to impress from a professional standpoint. But they also, like you said, they understand what it is. Like Coach Jackson and Coach Stapleton, you talk about knowing what it is. Those two guys came to the camp. We had Lawrence First and Goal camp before COVID. They came to the camp as campers. I mean, that's how long this thing's been around. Those guys are coaching in the SEC and the Big 12, and they came as campers. And they're not the only ones. Those two you just talked about a minute ago. Like this thing's been around so long now that there's, Coach Jackson, and Stapleton both. Those guys went to the camp as a camper. They coached at the camp as a coach, right? Volunteered their time, and now they're speaking. And Jackson's doing it for the second time, right? For West Virginia, they're doing it. And some of these guys have done it all 3 years. I mean, it really, they get it. It's for pediatric brain tumor research and cancer services. It's not it's a 501c3. It's not a GoFundMe page. And, Coach Tube and yourself obviously done an unreal job pushing it, promoting it, helping us and all that. Once the money gets to us, it's 100% in, 100% out. It all truly goes to our mission.
Yeah, that's, I think, the great thing about your organization. It's not a pass-through. I mean, there's a lot of foundations out there that have a ton of administrative costs, but you guys are 100% give to the cause.
That's exactly right. I mean, there's CEOs if you look up some of the foundations that you give to, you look up the CEOs making a lot of money, and there's nobody making any money here. It's it's all volunteer from the two people on this phone call on down. So it's I mean, it is. It's such a great clinic, though. Even if you didn't care about the cause, which I hope you do, I don't know how you don't do it just from a professional standpoint, because I do what I think most guys do. I try to watch them live, the ones I can, and then if you watch one every night, all right? If you watch one every night, it'll take you 130 days to watch the ones that we're putting out this year, not to mention the ones that you're going to add on with your, the way you're structuring it to give people even more value.
Yeah, definitely. And, I know a lot of coaches go out and do buy the courses after. Those will be available. The nice part about this membership is a benefit of that is they can buy these for 50% off as being a member in this as well. So some of them you're probably going to want to keep in your library beyond that 365 days. And as you and I discussed before, there's a lot of great stuff that maybe doesn't have the big logo recognition of the other teams that goes under the radar. We're going to make sure that those are a lot of the things that are put in this. We're going to definitely have some of those bigger names in there monthly, but we're going to make sure that some of these unknown presentations are in there as well. So much great stuff in the Lawrence First and Goal library. Now, after this clinic, we'll have over 400 courses. And I think the membership, you don't have to do anything if you've already registered and you have a premium pass. You will be then put into the membership following the clinic. If you bought the regular pass and would like to upgrade that, there will be an email going out to you, and you can email back to that and request that, and we'll prorate whatever amount you've paid so far to upgrade that to a premium pass and give you the access again to this clinic for a year plus the 120 other courses. I would probably add a little bit more at the beginning here, give you 10 extra courses in that first month, but you're going to see new stuff coming in there, and just, again, a tremendous way to learn the game.
No doubt. Here's the other thing I'll throw out there, trying to obviously sell this thing, is that, I'm going to speak at 3 clinics live, and all great clinics. But the difference is these guys from UCLA, all the way to the East Coast, and, Washington and Cal, defensive coordinator in Washington and Cal, and, NFL teams, wherever they are, they can sit at their desk at lunchtime or in the morning or in the afternoon, and they can do this clinic live. You can't get that on the clinics you go into. And it's the best professional development investment you'll ever make. So you go into your school and get it receipted. I do. I think that's a big deal. I mean, you're whenever everybody gives some money to something, right? Trying to help out. But this is something where you're giving money to a foundation that's making real progress, but you're getting something in return. So you're getting something in return that will really help you. And I know, Keith, you just said about, regardless, you talk about the coaches at Florida and Rutgers and, all the big schools, right? Cal and Washington and Oklahoma State and the NFL schools and Michigan. It goes up, Penn State, it goes on and on and on. But you know what? The coaches at the smaller schools are great football coaches, right? I mean, they really are. That's why we ask them to do it. You don't just let anybody do it. So, you're going to be blown away by those clinics, and you got to watch them, because they might give you more than the coaches at the big Power Fives, because they're in position to be, they're the head coach, and they're in position to give whatever they want. So I think it all has value, and everybody wins when you actually purchase this.
Definitely. Again, go to lfgf2023.coachesclinic.com. I highly encourage you to select one of the premium passes. And again, that's going to allow you access to all the clinics for 365 days. After about 30 days, all those will be chaptered and put in the Lawrence First and Goal membership. You'll get access to those there, where you're able to go to a specific topic within each of those presentations, and we'll be putting the other ones in as well. Again, lfgf2023.coachesclinic.com. This all kicks off on Wednesday and goes through Saturday. And Coach, you've done a tremendous job of putting this together. We certainly appreciate all you do and the time that you spent here today on the podcast.
Hey, thank you too. I hope you guys can check us out on Twitter. Please follow us on LFG Football Camp. That's how we get all our information out there. The more followers, the more we're able to get that information out. And we have some other great books out there that my sister-in-law wrote. I mean, Hope is Here to Stay and Lauren's Life Lessons. That if you bought the Lauren's Life Lessons, you'll be blown away. And I guarantee that you will look at that book over and over with all the things that are in that as well. But thanks, Keith, for everything. It was awesome, as always, having me on here. I appreciate it. And for all your help, because we couldn't do it without you. I know that. You put a lot of time and effort into this thing, and we appreciate it.